So hi everybody, I'm Kevin Thornton. I teach in the history department here, and I'm the professor for the course in Dublin. And before I talk about the slides, I'll tell you a little bit about what the course is. We go to Dublin and stay there for about 2.5 weeks, and we live at University College Dublin, which they call UCD. And UCD is the largest university in Ireland. Its campus is it's probably about the size of UVM's campus, maybe a little bigger. It's, sorry, I shouldn't be leaning on your chair. It's about 3 miles out of Dublin city center, so it's in a kind of suburban district. And there's a bus line into the city that you can take from the campus that we used about half the days we were there. And the way the course works is we have a class in the morning, I lecture in the morning, and we have a discussion. There's a reading list that you have to have started before we go to Ireland. And then after lunch, most days, we would go into the city center and look at something that was related to the lecture. And there were other days where we had field trips. There's another group of Americans that we have joint field trips with on weekends and some certain weekdays, depending on the schedule. And the slides are about some of the field trips, so I'll talk about that next. This is Glendalough, which is a monastery that was founded by St. Kevin in the 6th century. The buildings are more from the 10th century. It was a very, very successful monastery for hundreds of years, and was an important center of learning in Ireland, and is one of the sacred sites of Irish history. That's the main church in the picture. The buildings, one of the interesting things about it is the buildings are so tiny. And then in the background is the tower. Those towers are evident in lots of places in Ireland. I think that's the only one we actually physically saw. And those, there's some different theories about what those were for. Some people say that they were built as watchtowers, especially after the Viking invasions in the 10th century. Others say they were just big, like grain silos. But anyway, this is part of the Christianization of Ireland. Before I talk more, I should interrupt myself and say that Irish history is really about layers. The Celtic layer, the Christianization, the Viking invasions, the Norman invasions, and then the English presence for hundreds of years, the Tudor invasions, the Elizabethan settlements of Protestants in Ireland, the invasion by Cromwell. There's all of these different layers that build up in Irish history and that make Irish history very tortured, and they make Irish identity very complex. And what we seek to do in the course is unravel the layers and try to understand what Irish identity means and how it's contested and what it means today, what Irish nationalism means. Very, very important question. So this is about the Celtic Christian layer, and the establishment of Christianity in Ireland is one of the most important facts about Irish history. St. Patrick is in the 5th century, so this is a very, very early site, and it really, you really feel the ancient presence while you're there. Glendalough is a glen, a valley between two lakes. It's very pretty. St. Kevin lived in a cave in the back in the second lake, and there are legends about him. He was basically a monastic hermit. And supposedly was so devout that there's a story, for instance, that a woman came to seek wisdom from him, and he threw her off the cliff because she disturbed his holy prayer. So all that kind of story is really evident in this part of Irish history. So is this my slide projector? Is this the one? I think I grabbed the wrong one. Oh, the light wasn't on, thanks. Okay, this is a good example of what we do every day in class. The first day we do a lecture on prehistoric Ireland, on Celtic Ireland. I think we get up to the Vikings. We do a lot in the first day. And then we went downtown and go and look at the Natural History Museum. Sorry, the National History Museum. The Natural History Museum's around the corner from there. And this museum has a tremendous collection of Irish artifacts. This is the Ardagh Chalice. This is a really incredible example of Celtic Christian art. It's in perfect shape. It's in a room full of artifacts like that. And we spent a couple of hours in the museum looking at these things and thinking about, how Irish history is still present in Ireland. Fantastic museum. And that's our first excursion downtown. This is also in downtown Dublin. We go there on another day. This is Christchurch Cathedral. Christchurch Cathedral is one of two main Church of Ireland cathedrals in Dublin. The fact that they're Church of Ireland and not Roman Catholic is very, very interesting. The fact that these two cathedrals are only about 2 or 3 blocks from each other. I think in American terms, they're about 3 blocks maybe from each other. One of them was built inside the city walls and one of them was built outside the city walls, and that was the difference. Christchurch was built in the city walls, and you can see that it's really important in Norman Irish history that the first English king to visit Ireland is Henry II. He takes communion there in 1171. Strongbow, the first Norman in Ireland, he's really the Norman who conquers much of Ireland. You can't say he conquers the entire. He's buried there, and he had only been in Ireland a couple of years when Henry comes along. So that's a really important site in the Norman history of Ireland. It comes up again during the fighting between King James and William of Orange. That's won by William. There are artifacts from that in there. And the other thing is architecturally is really interesting. It's largely rebuilt in the 19th century. The inside is very striking, and the crypt is particularly interesting there. It's a great site right in the heart of the city. It's basically where Viking Dublin was founded. It's right on top on that. This is Strongbow's tomb inside Christchurch Cathedral. So you can see he shows up in 1169 and, he arrives in August 1170. He was invited in 1169. And he begins the Norman/English presence in Ireland. So very, very important, piece of Irish history there. He married an Irish woman, and that allows us to think about the really complex relationship between the Normans and the Irish, the Celtic Irish aristocracy. Both groups would have been Catholic at this point. When Protestantism comes along a couple hundred years later, it really complicates matters. And that's just part of the visit to the cathedral. It's really nice. We've skipped ahead hundreds of years now to another spot we go to this is a UVM only field trip. This is a great site. It's so good for teaching, and it's so physically so interesting. Castletown House. Castletown House is built at the beginning, near the beginning of the Irish ascendancy. And that's a reference to 18th century Ireland, when Ireland's ruled by a Protestant elite. Not only Protestant, but Church of Ireland elite. And Castletown House was built by the richest man in Ireland, the richest commoner in Ireland, who was the Speaker of the Irish House, and who was given the task by William of Orange of dividing up Irish lands, which coincidentally happened to make him enormously rich. I don't know how that happened. And he builds this house, which is a monument to the Irish aristocracy. And a subsequent generation of his family, there's a young bride who shows up when she's 17 years old, and she decorates the place. So it's this incredible monument to the 18th century Irish life, and it allows us to talk about the ascendancy and their role. Their kind of role as a kind of imposed elite upon a vast Roman Catholic peasant population. And it's architecturally so interesting. It's really good. It has a long park, which would have been to the left of where the photograph was taken. Big basically a gigantic long driveway out to the village that these aristocratic families tended to dominate their localities. So they would be like the kings of this little village. It's all still there in the physical geography of the place. It's a great site. It's about a half an hour drive outside of Dublin. There's another view of it. And this Georgian architecture, which is famous, Ireland's famous for, is still evident here, and a lot of it's evident in downtown Dublin. We drive by it on the bus on the way in a lot too. Very interesting. There's a Georgian House Museum in Dublin too that I want to go to. That's the inside of Castletown House. That's one of the rooms. Castletown House has a really evocative aura of faded grandeur to it. Some of these places look like they have had a lot of money sunk into them, and they look new. Well, I can't say that, but Castletown House didn't have a lot of money sunk into it, and it shows in very, very interesting ways. There's a room upstairs where they've taken the plaster off the walls, and you can see the structure of the building. Now we skipped ahead again to, this is Kilmainham Jail in downtown Dublin. This is one of the most popular tourist sites in Ireland. They're very proud of Kilmainham Jail. And the tour, when you're there, is this little education in Irish nationalism. They're so proud of it. Here's why. Every Irish rebel from 1798 through 1916 almost did time in Kilmainham Jail. And the cells, they know who was in what cell, so you walk around and you can see the cells all these people in. There's a chapel in Kilmainham Jail, and one of the 1916 rebels was married in that chapel the evening before his execution. And it's so evocative. It's a tiny little room, and they tell you the story, and his wife begged the warden to be allowed back to see her husband, and they gave her 10 minutes later that night to come back and see him for the last time. And they kept a guard in the room for the entire 10 minutes. Anyway, it's all still there. And this is the main this is the main room of the jail. The jail was built in, I think, in basically two parts. There's an earlier part. This is the later part. And there was kind of a new theory about incarceration. They had this big open space. And one of the reasons I wanted to show you this picture is because of this one. You can see it's the same room. It's the corner there on the right at the bottom. And that's Charles Stewart Parnell in jail there in 1881. He was the leader of the Irish Land League, and he is with the other Land League leaders plotting their next political move from jail. So the place is really steeped in Irish history. They take you outside and show you the spot where the 1916 rebels were executed. This little bitty courtyard outside the jail. They lined these guys up. One of whom, by the way, had been wounded in the leg in the Rising, the Easter Rising in 1916, and was unable to stand. He had this suppurating wound on his leg, so they tied him to a chair and then shot him while he was in the chair. So there's just, Ireland is full of, and Dublin in particular, is full of so many sites like this that you can, it's such a great way to learn history because you're there and you're seeing it. We also go on a walking tour about the Rising and go to the General Post Office where much of the fighting was, go along the River Liffey, go to the Four Courts building, go to see this great memorial to one of the rebels who bled to death in the street during the Rising. Really, really interesting stuff. This is the heart of downtown Dublin. This is Trinity College on the right here, and then on the left is what's today the Bank of Ireland building. Was built as the Irish Parliament during the Ascendancy. One of the things that happens after the rebellion in 1798 is the British just say, okay, Ireland, you've had a chance to rule yourself as part of the empire, but we're taking over. And they close the Irish Parliament. And it gets sold to the Bank of Ireland about 1800, 1801, and it's still owned by the Bank of Ireland. And the the really interesting thing about this engraving here is that I wanted to compare it to this photograph here. Nothing's changed. They paved the roads and it looks like they were cobblestone at that point, but essentially nothing's changed. And that's the great thing about Dublin. It's all still there. And we go in almost every day or take a field trip almost every day. There are only 2 or 3 days. In fact, I don't think there are any days we were on UCD campus for the entire time. There aren't any. And there are a bunch of places I haven't bothered to show you in the slideshow where you go. So that's the course. And I think the great thing about the course is when you hear about it and you read about it and then you walk around and see it, it really sinks in. The last day in Ireland, last year, we went to the Irish Parliament building and we were getting a little tour of the Parliament building and an American lady asked a question and 3 of my students were able to answer the question. It made me really proud of them. Trinity College, by the way, on the right there, that's also where the Book of Kells is, and the long room of Trinity Library is an incredible piece of architecture. A really important site in Irish history, intellectually speaking. So much Trinity was the school of the ascendancy. So people like Jonathan Swift were there. This photograph was probably taken must have been in a cold day in November or something, because in July that whole sidewalk is just jammed with people. That's where we take the bus back to UCD. If you follow that fence to the right of the picture, that's where the bus stops are, and that's where we were there probably half the days we were in Ireland. We were there at some point. So that's what the course is like. I can talk about the readings if you're interested, or just answer any questions that anybody would have. Yeah, the readings, we have a textbook. It's written by an American. It's a short introductory history of Ireland. I think it's really good for American students because it doesn't assume a lot of knowledge on their part. And we read that chapter by chapter, depending on what day, we're talking about that day. And then for the rest of it, we read literature. There's a memoir called Borstal Boy that I assigned. It's a great piece of literature. It's the story of a teenager who's in the IRA in the 1940s, and he gets arrested with the equipment for making a bomb, and he gets put in an English reform school. And it's a memoir of his life and that experience, and it's also about his transformation from somebody who's committed to violence to somebody who rejects it. And he was a playwright in later life. His ear for language and dialect is fantastic, and it's just such a great book about what it means to be Irish too. He's working that out throughout the book. What does Catholicism mean to him? How does that fit in with Irish nationalism? How does he feel about the English? How can he be friends with the English and at the same time think that they're colonial oppressors? It's a great book. So we read that. We read Seamus Heaney's poetry. Heaney died this summer. He writes about the Troubles in the North. We read short stories by Frank O'Connor. He wrote in the 1920s. He wrote a very, very famous story about the Irish Civil War called Guest of the Nation. That's about the rebellion and not about the Civil War. Let's see, what else? There's another book that I'm blanking on right now. It's not going to come to me right now, but it's also literary. And all that's on the website too, what the reading assignments are. Any questions about food or anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Is there going to be a lot of stuff that's focusing specifically on just the culture as well?
Well, I take the position that Irish culture is inseparable from Irish history. Now let me give you an example of that. We go to what's called a Céilí 2 nights. It's a dance.
I actually Irish too.
Okay, so you know all about it. And you probably know that they end Céilís with the national anthem. And why is a cultural event ended with the national anthem? It's all because so much of Irish cultural identity is tied in with Irish history and Irish nationalism. So even though it's a dance and everybody's there having fun, and they'll make you a star. Anybody who knows how to step dance is brought out for a solo. They'll get it out of you. Also, they'll be able to tell because the rest of us are stumbling around and smashing into walls and stuff, and it's going to show. But it's also part of Irish history. So we do some cultural things. We go, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it history or culture or archaeology, but we go to Newgrange, the most famous prehistoric Irish site, and look around in there, and they give you a spooky little tour, and then we go look at art galleries and stuff too.
Is there any like mythology and folklore and stuff?
No, only in the Newgrange day. I don't teach that stuff. I don't know enough about it, and I'm more interested in the question of nationalism anyway. Yeah. We get a little bit of that. It's hard to escape, but yeah.
What other counties do we visit?
Well, we go to Wicklow. We go to Powerscourt, which is one of the great houses of Ireland, and it's got a very famous garden. One of the 19th century owners of Powerscourt decided he wanted a garden, and he had 144 men work for a decade to build it. So it's pretty spectacular. They did a good job. But for the most part, we stay in Dublin. And the day we go to Newgrange, that's a drive for a while. I don't know, like an hour or so. But we don't go to the south or the west of Ireland or anything. It's all within Dublin.
So you're staying in dormitories at the
Yes.
university?
Yes. UCD has nice dormitories. They're apartments with multiple bedrooms in it, so that everybody has a kitchen and a living area. There's a central dining hall about a 5-minute walk away. The accommodations were pretty good.
And they're shared bedrooms? Or
No, everyone has an individual bedroom. Yeah. Yeah, it's not it's not a cinder block room with 4 beds in it. No.
Is the food like a dining hall situation out on campus, or
Yes.
is it more? Is there an opportunity to maybe get a little more traditional foods or that kind of thing?
Not really. We took one day where we skipped the dining hall and we went into the oldest pub in Dublin, which was apparently founded by Vikings, or they claim it, called the Brazen Head, and we had lunch there, and everybody got pub food. And then we had a banquet on the last day. But they took us to a nice restaurant. It wasn't traditional at all. And my wife likes to say, have you ever heard of an Irish restaurant? There's no great Irish cuisine anyway. So they'd much rather go to a fancy French restaurant or something than yeah. Yes. Oh, the workload was something we figured out as we went along last time. You pretty much have reading every night, but a big part of the experience is also getting to know the other students and getting to know some of the Irish students who are around. So I didn't want to overload people and make them feel like they were missing out because they had to read. It's a delicate balance. So what I do is I asked students to read the 2 longer books before we went. And I remember the other one now. It's Seamus Dean's Reading in the Dark. It's a novel about Derry in the Troubles. So I asked them to read the 2 long ones before we left, and a given night's reading in Ireland would be a textbook chapter and a couple of short stories or a poem or something. And then I asked them to write 2 papers. One of them is on the readings, and one of them is a project that people decide decide as they're there what they're interested in. So we don't sit down and talk about that until the day before we leave. And then there's 2 weeks before grades are due. So basically I have 2 weeks to get that project done and email it to me. And people did things like they wrote about their family history. One girl wrote about Patrick Pearse, the Irish revolutionary. He was an educational theorist and a poet, among other things. So she wrote about that. Somebody wrote a literary paper. So it's whatever piques their interests. We got a paper about sports. We go to Croke Park, which is the headquarters of the Gaelic Athletic Association, and that's where Gaelic football is played, and hurling. All the championships are held there. It's like an 80,000 person stadium. We had this great tour of Croke Park, but because it's Ireland, it's not just about sports. There's also a museum in Croke Park of the Gaelic Athletic Association, and the Gaelic Athletic Association is all tied up with Irish nationalism. It's basically a kind of anti-imperialist organization. We're going to play Irish sports. They hated soccer. The president of Ireland, who was a member of the Gaelic Athletic Association, went to a soccer game in something like 1938 between England and Ireland. And he went as this kind of, diplomatic duty. They kicked him out of the Gaelic Athletic Association because he attended a soccer game. So it's inescapable. Everywhere you turn, you're running up against Irish history. And that's what I meant before about you can't separate culture out as a different thing, because it all fits in together. And they're so aware of that. We go on a tour of Trim Castle the same day as we went to Newgrange, which is a Norman castle. It's very well preserved. And the tour guide took us around and he talked about, why the stairways are built the way they are and things like that. And he's about my age, and after the tour, when everyone was kind of relaxing and enjoying the view, they take you on the roof of the castle before the end. He started to say he'd grown up in the town, and he pointed out things you could see from the castle. And there's a statue of Wellington in Trim. And I said, well, how do people feel about a statue of Wellington? And talked for 10 minutes about how people felt about the English, about how the Black and Tans had raided the town and burnt buildings, and in the 1920s and early 1920, and it was still remembered. He talked about how when he was growing up, nobody paid attention to the castle, that he didn't really think twice about the castle because people considered it English. It was been there for 800 years, but they didn't consider it part of their town in a way. And when you scratch the surface in Ireland, when you start asking people questions, what do you think about this? How do you feel about it? What does this mean to you? All of this comes out. And they're so much more steeped in history than we are in that way. Doesn't apply to everybody, and a lot of the people under 25 don't care. But the older ones really do.
What kind of interaction, you mentioned there might be some interaction with some of the Irish students at the college?
Yeah.
How does that work?
UCD is pretty dead in the summer. More so than American University. One day there, I walked around after dinner. I don't think I saw a soul. And the library was even closed. But they assigned 4 Irish students to be our companions for they lived in the dorms with us. They went on the field trips with us. They helped us figure out where the bus stops were, things like that. And they ate with us, and they told us, they chose people who were very open and friendly, and ask them about their lives. And like one of the really interesting things, it was very important to them, is that I think 3 of the 4 were they were about to graduate or had just graduated, and they were leaving. One of them was moving to Australia, one of them was moving to Argentina, and I forget where the third one was going. England. There's a new Irish diaspora. They're very worried about their economy. the crash in 2007, 2008 was very difficult in Ireland. More than one person said to me, there was a lot of construction on campus, and they said this is the biggest construction site in Ireland right now because construction's dead. They had a big housing crash, and all of that is in the forefront of their minds. So the students are really willing to talk about their lives.
Have all of you seen the website that has the Dublin information on it? And did you check out the UCD video?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
There's even the one with Joffrey, or at least I saw from Game of Thrones. They had the one of the actors there was I guess he went there. They had a big long interview with him, so it was kind of interesting.
Oh, okay. I don't know who Joffrey is.
I'm sorry.
I
it's
just,
a
but I did watch the UCD
the tour.
tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they put that on our website so that everybody who was interested could go on and look at, the campus and
It's
you know
very
what
modern
it's like.
campus.
It's very modern campus. So
Mhm.
at least you would be able to see where you'd be staying, and the parents could see where the students would be staying, and you could get a better look at it.
What is it? Is the neighborhood or the town that the?
It's called Still Oregon. It's kind of a suburb. It's fairly residential, but the campus is not only is the campus big, but the reason they moved out, they were in downtown Dublin, and they moved out there I think in 1970. That's why all the buildings look the way they do. It's because they had land and they had room for expansion. So the campus is kind of plunked in a really quite large area, and you'd have to walk a long way to get off campus into an. I never did it. Some of the students who were runners they told me they ran around the edge of the campus, but the campus is really its own world. It's very safe. And that area it's South Dublin. It's a nice part of Dublin. I don't even know if it's Dublin. It's not really Dublin proper at that point, but.
So Newtown? Did you say Newtown?
No, it's Still Oregon.
Oh, still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay.
It's a little bit more low-key than Trinity campus. We were just there last
Oh
year.
yeah, I mean Trinity's an
Temple Bar
absolute
is a little bit
zoo in the summer. One of the days we were in, we met one of our tour. The guy who took us on the Revolutionary tour is a Trinity PhD student, so he had really great, deep knowledge. Anyway, I think it was that day. I just grabbed a Trinity student. And I said, how can you stand it? All of these tourists around, it's thousands of people, and he said, "Well, I forgot what he said. You get used to it." He said, "It's not bad until once the summer's over, it's not as bad." But UCD's very different vibe. It's much quieter. Yeah, and we don't want to go to the old Temple Bar thing anymore.
It's just a block away. But yeah, it's so much more diverse. I mean, it's so diverse now, Dublin.
Yeah.
From the Celtic Tiger, although it sounds like.
Oh yeah, the Celtic Tiger's dead there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. No church visit? Oh, well, you go to Christchurch.
We go to Christchurch. We go to St. Patrick's, both Church of Ireland. We had one student who wanted to go to Mass on the middle Sunday we were there, and there is a Catholic church about a mile off campus. There's a chapel on campus too, but that was closed. But there was a parish church about a mile away, and as it turns out, I told her I'd go with her. We didn't go because I think she decided to take a nap or something instead, but it's available.
how does it work with, you get UVM college credit for taking the class, or how does
Yes,
it work?
it's a 3-credit course, which is the standard UVM course. And when we set up the course, one of the elements was the discussion is make it a real course. So the reading load is it's a heavy reading load for a short period of time because it's really a semester's worth of reading. And 2 papers is pretty standard. Oh, I forgot to mention that last time I timed it so that the papers were due the last day, but the banquet was the night before the papers were due. And it just wasn't fair, so I had everybody email the first paper and the second paper at the same time, which worked out well. I read a draft of everybody's paper, which is actually more attention than you get in a typical UVM class. So everyone brought a draft to me on the Wednesday before we left, and then Thursday night we talked over everybody. There's a teaching assistant and myself, and all 3 of us would sit and 2 of us would sit and talk with each student about each paper. So there, the workload's there, and the discussion expectations are the same as I would teach in any other class. I expect people to have done their reading, and last year we attracted great students. Everybody was there to learn. Nobody considered it a vacation. It was a course, and it worked really well. And I thought the discussions were great because we'd have a discussion, then we'd get on a bus and go see what we'd just been talking about, and we'd hear an Irish expert talk about it. For instance, when we went to Newgrange, UCD sent an archaeologist with us, who was also an expert on, his real expertise is on medieval castles. So he was there with us at Trim. He went to Newgrange with us and talked about the archaeology of that. It was great. I learned a ton. And the whole experience, I learned a lot for the entire trip. It was just, I personally, I thought that the students were spoiled because if that was their first experience of a college class and they think they're all going to be that way, they're going to be sadly disappointed. It was fun and it was interesting.
So to kind of go on about your 3 credits, Vermont students can use their dual enrollment voucher if they are junior or senior. They do have, the state of Vermont will pay for a 3-credit course. So they can use their dual enrollment voucher to pay the tuition for the course. But then they would have to pay the program fee and obviously their airfare. So if you go on our website, you would see under the tuition, the tuition that's listed is for students who have a dual enrollment voucher. So students get 1 dual enrollment voucher their junior year and 1 their senior year to use. And so I know that there's some new guidelines around the dual enrollment vouchers, so if you've already used one, like in the fall or in the spring, that you do have to get the permission of your principal or the designee at your high school to take a course during the summer, like if you're going into your senior year. And so if they're like consecutive semesters, like if you're taking a course in the spring and then you want to take this summer course, then the person at your high school that is the designee for dual enrollment has to approve of it. But yeah, you can use your dual enrollment voucher for this course, at least for the tuition. So at least is some savings for the course.
So is that how we would initiate this, by going to like the guidance counselor at the school and speaking to them about it? Okay.
Yeah.
And then how much money do you need spending money?
Oh, that's something.
General.
We're trying to change. Nicole, maybe you should talk about this more than I should. go. Why don't you do it?
So there is there's the program fee that's, that students have to pay. So up front, I believe like the deposit for the course is $200 for the deposit. And then in the spring, I believe it's like May is when the first billing happens. And that's when students would be billed for their tuition and the remainder of the program fee. Airfare, like I said, is separate. So we've arranged with Accent Travel for at least the Vermont students to go through Accent Travel and get the group rate. But the remainder of the tuition and program fee would go through UVM Student Financial Services. And that, I think the first billing is around May 7th. But as far as additional spending money, it would really be up to the students, like how much additional money they want to bring on the trip with them, because I think we tried to.
Are we including the 1916 tour as part of the program fee this year?
I think we tried to.
I
include
contracted with them
somewhat.
separately. We didn't do that through UCD.
Right, but I think
Yeah.
that we tried to put in as much as we could
Okay.
in the program fee,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
that students didn't have to bring.
Yeah, because
As much additional money, so that we talk about this because a little bit of what happened last year is that we did additional trips outside of the UCD group. And so it was students.
So
did
students
pay
spent
out
more
of-
last year out of pocket than I think they will this year. The day we went to the pub lunch, we gave up our UCD lunch and everybody paid out of pocket for that. There were 2 afternoons where we got set loose for 3 hours to shop, in Grafton Street. And some people bought themselves a cup of coffee and some people spent a fortune. But you can pinch pennies on it. Once you've paid the fees, it's I don't think it's too outrageous.
I think it's really up to the student, what the student would want to bring. Like you said, if you're going to have like a pub lunch or something, then, bring some additional money to go out to lunch or, whatever, to have additional spending money. But obviously, the fees that, to go to all the places that we've included on this schedule are going to be included in the program fee, which is why we set a program fee.
Forgot what I was going to say. This escaped me what I was going to say.
And so I'm the advisor for the pre-college students, so if you have any questions, you can feel free to call me and ask for me. I'm Nicole Hathaway.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. A lot of the national museums are all free. There's a voluntary, you can throw in €5 if you want and feel guilty, but they're all state museums. So we go to 3 or 4 of those. We go to the History Museum with the chalice in it. We go to Collins Barracks, which is another branch of the National History Museum. The National Gallery's free, and I'm forgetting something else we did that was a national museum. So.
Other questions?
How about the, so just, you don't need a special visa, just passport is what you need to?
No special visa.
Okay, so just passport, and it would be, and I assume flying out of Burlington but those arrangements would be made, it's just,
The
it's
students
paid
do make
separately.
the students do make the arrangements, and from what I've heard from Angie at Accent Travel, is that the students make the arrangements and they have to pay like one chunk fees for the group rates. So I believe students that are paying have to pay them with a check if they want to do the group rate, so that they can then turn around and pay their flight or whatever with, like, Accent Travel would pay like one lump check. And so UVM, we have to pay with a check for our faculty to go. So they wouldn't take, if people wanted to participate in the group rate, then they wouldn't take like a Visa card or something. That is what I'm told, because they have to do like one group rate in order to get the group rates. What happened last year is that we ended up canceling the group rate just before we flew, like probably 3 weeks before we flew out, because we found out that the rates went down a little bit. But the purpose of it is so that everybody can fly together. So I'm actually the one who works with her, and, you know, to make those arrangements and to, you know, check on the rates and see where the rates are at that point. And so she will, you know, she'll be working with me to say, oh, okay, the rates have gone down, maybe we should cancel the group flight, but still have everybody call me, and we'll at least get everybody on the same flight, so that, and I know that Kevin and Laura like met everybody at the airport.
Yeah, we met everybody in Burlington. There were three students, one from California who met us in Philadelphia where the transatlantic flight was, and then there were two who were, I forgot what they were doing, but they met us in Philadelphia as well. Flying together was a great idea. It gives everybody a little bonding experience right away, and then we got out of customs in Dublin, all jet lagged and everything, and UCD was right there for us. They just took us by the hand and led us to a bus, and then led us to our rooms, and we slept, and that was good. And one thing I want to say about last year's trip, and I certainly hope it's true this year, is they were an incredibly cohesive group. They were so supportive of one another, and they all liked each other, and there was a real camaraderie that built up pretty quickly. Kids are adaptable, I guess. That's
We tried not to make the group too big, so like last year, I think we had 14 students
yeah.
last year, and this year, you know, we've made the maximum 20 students, so we don't really want like it to get to a huge group where, you know, it's unmanageable, and, you know, we want everybody to have a good time and to be able to have that cohesive experience and bond, and so.
So just a quick, faculty, how many faculty go, and?
two.
Okay.
I do the lectures, and Laura Mina, who's the librarian at Mount Abraham High School, comes, which was great. We worked well together, and she was just very, very helpful. She knows kids that age really well. And was incredibly supportive. She was also good at things that I found that I'm not particularly good at. Like, we had one day somebody was feeling well, and she's like, you know, she's a little under the weather, and I was like, what, really? You know, and it turned out she was. So it was, as far as I was concerned, it was a real blessing to have her along. I was very lucky.
And then if someone does need to go to like the infirmary or something.
Yeah, we didn't have that as an issue. But UCD has, you know, all sorts of, it's a big university, so they have a student infirmary, and they, the first thing we do when we go to Ireland, when we land, is they know you're tired, they show you your room, and then they give you a few hours to sleep, and then we had a meeting that night, and probably 6 different people talked to us about, you know, these are the rules, these are the expectations, this is what to do if there's a fire in your room, this is who you should call if you have questions, this is where you eat. So they really take us by the hand, and which is great, because it's a lot less for us to worry about.
I do think, to answer your question, if I remember correctly, and let me just look at this really quickly, that one of their things.
Do you want to share screen?
No, it's fine, it's fine. But I think on their checklist that we received from UC Dublin is that, because they send us a checklist of what to send our students, So there are some different things that are different from the US a little bit. And one of the things is that their like plugs are different. One of their plugs are different, so you have to like bring
They gave
special
us plugs
plugs.
last
They
year.
did give you
Yeah.
plugs last year? Okay, well, they
Yeah.
said to bring special plugs, or they
Okay.
might provide them. But one thing was, which made me think of this, is their pharmacy. So they said that if you have like a cold or a headache or anything like that, that you should bring your own medications, even if they're over-the-counter medications, with you on the trip, just to have, because their UCD pharmacy is closed during the summer. So.
There is a convenience store on campus, about a 5-minute walk from where we stay. And they would sell aspirin and things like that too.
Okay, they didn't tell us that, but
Yeah,
they
that
just
was-
said, that was
yeah.
one of their things, is that they told us to tell the students that their pharmacy was closed, so
Yeah.
to bring.
And we also get refrigerators, so you know, I went and bought orange juice there and kept it in the refrigerator, things like that.
Well, we wanna make sure that students are ready, prepared for that.
Is the writing done in like a computer lab there, or is it a good idea to bring?
Oh, no,
You have
it's
to bring your
you
laptop.
should bring your own
Bring-
laptop.
Bring a laptop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our classroom was great. They gave us a room in the business school, which is, you can Google the UCD Business School. It's brand spanking new. It was built, must have been built as a Celtic Tiger building, maybe 10 years old or something. And it's, you know, it's as high tech as you could hope for. I think most students did writing in their rooms. I asked for us to get library passes this year, we didn't last year, and I think Enda's gonna arrange that, I'm not positive about that. But they don't really need the library, it's, you know, they don't have to do any research or anything. And there's a kind of group meeting room, but I didn't think it was very conducive for writing. We watched a couple of movies in there. We watched, I thought, a great movie about the Irish Civil War called The Wind That Shakes the Barley, and then we watched a fun movie, what was it, Waking Ned Devine, which is a comedy.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
But people wrote in their rooms, I think,
Okay.
which are quiet.
So definitely want a power adapter then to be able to.
Yeah, and they're, you can even buy them in the airport in Dublin if you forget. They're €2 each or something. Well, I don't want to force you to sit here all night listening to me talk about that. It was